Welcome into the PFF podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. It's time to dissect a hectic Week 15 in the NFL. Sam, what'd you think of this weekend? A lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah, pretty impressive. We saw some very strange things in the NFL this week and some pretty awesome stuff. It was a good week.
I really hate the fact that we end up having to talk about rules so much. Like, I really have zero desire to talk about rules and what's a catch and what's not. I feel like it's a part of the whole gig, though. But I did tweet after Sunday night, you know, you look at this weekend and you've got the catch, no catch in New England and Pittsburgh. You've got index card gate or whatever you want to call it with the Raiders and the Cowboys. And, of course, that game ends with everyone's favorite, the fumble through the end zone for the touchback to lose the game and perhaps a playoff opportunity for the Raiders. So this weekend had it all. Let's start in Pittsburgh. New England and Pittsburgh, a crazy game, an unbelievable finish. Pittsburgh controls much of the game. New England makes a miraculous comeback. Pittsburgh looks like they're ready to they're going to win the game. If this pass is ruled a touchdown, at the very least, they're going to tie the game and go to overtime. What'd you think seeing everything unfold? And of course, the NFL, you know, with the microscope on them once again, what's a catch? What's not? Everyone's getting confused.
Yeah, it was a great game, and it was a great finish to a great game. There's so many storylines to come out of this because we'll get to the catch, no catch stuff kind of a little bit later on. But the first thing I think is big picture. I actually think, other than the fact that they basically lost with this gut punch of a way to lose the game, I think big picture this was a pretty good game for Pittsburgh because coming into this game, the narrative was all about how the Steelers just can't beat the Patriots. They're not good at it. Every time Tom Brady runs up against the Steelers, he absolutely eviscerates them, and that zone defense that they run. We've talked before about how they run more zone defense than any other team in the league, and Brady just carves up zone defenses. So they needed to change something, and they did in this game. They clearly worked on their game plan. They came in with something different. Tony Romo was all over it in the commentary booth. They were running a lot of man coverage, and I think that is the way to beat this Patriots team, or at least the way to give them problems, and it worked. There was at least one relatively significant flaw in the game plan, and that is that man coverage generally gives the Patriots some problems, but you probably need a better answer to Rob Gronkowski than just saying, Sean Davis, you got him one-on-one all game, okay? That'll work out well, go for it. Because it didn't. Sean Davis gave up 158 receiving yards to Gronkowski and a 2-point conversion late in the game, so that part at least needs some work. But overall, big picture, I think this said a lot in terms of the Steelers being able to beat New England if they meet again in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, we've discussed this for a while now. Would they change? Would Pittsburgh change? They love to play their zones. They've been doing it forever. They did it in the AFC Championship against New England and got absolutely torched. The last time Pittsburgh beat New England was 2011, and the script on this game was very similar to that game, which was Pittsburgh I think they got a timely turnover in that game as well, but it was mostly the fact they controlled the ball, and they did an unbelievable job yesterday, especially Sam, because I was grading their side of the ball, and I know that you didn't do any work in that game. I was grading Pittsburgh's side, and I was over there trying to play catch up the whole time because they had two drives that lasted, I think it was 7 or 8 minutes, two different drives where they were just sitting on the ball and running it with Le'Veon Bell, and then Big Ben would complete a 4-yard pass here, a 3-yard pass there to convert, run for 5 to convert. He made some big red zone throws. There was a lot to like about Pittsburgh's game plan from an offensive standpoint. And this is without Antonio Brown, too. That's the other big story, right? He goes down.
Oh, no. There's a man down.
Early in the game. And he's the guy that when you need a big play, it's always going to be Antonio Brown. But they were still able to make some big plays in the passing game with guys like Juju Smith-Schuster stepping up and Big Ben just making a ton of just impressive throws when they needed it. So from a game plan standpoint, I thought Pittsburgh executed to perfection. But look, man coverage or not on the other side of the ball, you leave the ball, you leave it in your defense's hands to try to slow down Tom Brady in the offense and Brady drove them down pretty quickly for what eventually was the game-winning drive in the fourth quarter, even though it wasn't without some controversy on the other end when Pittsburgh tried to drive down and match them.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see when we get our coverage numbers, just how much man coverage the Steelers ran. That comes when we run our all-22 process. So we're going to get those numbers in a while. But
yeah, it wasn't like pure man the entire time.
No,
they mixed it up.
They obviously ramped up the amount of man coverage they played. I'm just curious exactly how much they did it when we get the final numbers. But I think it's a big statement for them that they were able to change that game plan up, and it worked to an extent against the Patriots. I think the other thing we've said before is that Artie Burns, their best cover corner, I think is a better man cover corner than he is in zone anyway. So I think in theory, bits of this do help that Steelers team. As you said, they also did it without Antonio Brown for most of the game, which I think is a big deal. So overall, I think big picture is a pretty good thing. It's a really interesting way it ended, though, in terms of game management and all this kind of stuff, because the Steelers could have taken the game out of New England's hands entirely late on the game. I think 2 minutes and 13 left on the clock maybe. They faced 4th and 1. If they get a first down, the game is effectively over. And it is in their own half still. But the game effectively is coming down at that point to you get one play to gain 1 yard, and you can pick your favorite play. All you have to do is gain a yard. And if you can execute that, you win the game. We all go home. Congratulations. If you don't win the game, you don't necessarily lose, but you definitely set them up in a much better position. I think you have better odds of executing your favorite play for a yard than you do giving the ball back to Tom Brady with 2 minutes to work with to score a touchdown. And instead, they punted it back, they gave it to Brady. Brady marched down the field and scored a touchdown. Admittedly, there was a batted pass that ended up right in the hands of Sean Davis, who dropped an interception, which would have ended the game as well. I think that was the first play of that drive. But after that, marched down the field, scored the touchdown, and put the Steelers in a hole. I just think you always, in that situation, take the play yourself. You give yourself the chance to win it, and if you don't execute and get that play, you probably don't deserve to be winning the game.
So that's reminiscent for the fans that do remember, Sam, 2009, Patriots at Colts. It's Brady versus Manning. The Patriots have the lead. It's 4th and 2 in their own territory. Everything in the book says you punt, and Belichick made that decision. He said, I'm one play away from winning the game. We're going to do it. Brady completes what ended up being only a 1-yard pass to Kevin Falk, and then the rest was history. Peyton Manning drives the Colts down for only about a 35, 40-yard drive for the game-winning touchdown. But that was the exact scenario. It was basically, first off, I don't trust my defense. Secondly, I just certainly don't trust them against Peyton Manning. And whether I give Peyton 70 yards or 40 yards to go, he's probably going to do it. Why not just, I'm going to trust my offense for one play. And if you look at the way Pittsburgh's offense was executing, they did it. They just did a fantastic job. One of my favorite stats from the game, Trey Flowers, the defensive end for New England, drops into coverage 3 times, and Pittsburgh found him every single time. They targeted him 3 times with Le'Veon Bell. Every single time he dropped back. So, again, from a game plan perspective, tons of credit to Pittsburgh. I thought they did a fantastic job of, doing what they had to do to win, and they probably should have won the game if not for some quirky play down the stretch. Do we have to get into what's a catch, what's not a catch, or can we?
Oh, yes, we
stick to only fun stuff?
Yes, we do. We got to get into it.
Make it quick, Sam.
So the Patriots score. They get a 2-point conversion because, again, Rob Gronkowski was one-on-one with Sean Davis, and that wasn't going well.
They set that up well too, by the way. They motioned Amendola to the other side of the field, and they essentially gave a look for the exact 2-point conversion that they used in the Super Bowl last year, the screen to Amendola. And I think they could have either run the screen, or if Gronk was singled up, they could have run the fade or the slant off of that. Well, they kept Gronk in single coverage, and that's an easy win for New England.
So at that point, we're thinking, okay, that's probably the game done. The Patriots have won it now. But the very first play of the next drive, the Steelers get a 60-something yard completion, catch and run by Juju Smith, some pretty suspect Patriots tackling in the secondary, and they're set up again in the shadow of the Patriot. They're like, what? They're inside the red zone immediately. The next play, they in invert, or what's I can never remember this. Air quotes, complete a pass to Jesse James. Jesse James reaches out to put it over the goal line to win the game. Score, touchdown, everybody goes wild, Steelers have won. A few seconds later, everyone realizes this is under review. And when you start to see the replays, you can see the ball start to move. And the thing I tweeted immediately at that time was, don't do this, NFL. Don't do it. Don't mess this up. But of course they do. It's the NFL. It's not a catch. The ball's moving. So the review rules it incomplete pass. Everything's gone to hell again. The Steelers ultimately get a couple more shots. They move the ball a bit. They get up to try and spike it. Ben Roethlisberger gets the call on the headset, don't spike it, run a play. So half the team thinks it's a spike, the other half don't. It's a bit chaotic. He ends up throwing a forced pass into coverage. He gets tipped and intercepted. Game over. But when you go back to this catch or no catch by Jesse James, my favorite thing about it is that almost immediately after the game, there was a video put out by NFL operations, Al Riveron, who is basically in charge of explaining this craziness. Senior Vice President of NFL Officiating, Al Riveron. And I think we have a clip of exactly how they begin the video of explaining why this is not a complete catch. So let's play that now.
As we can see here, Roethlisberger completes a pass to James, and James is going to the ground as he reaches the goal line. And that's the key here. He is going to the ground. By rule, to complete the process of the catch, he must survive the ground.
So there you go. Perfect. The reason, as we can all see, Ben Roethlisberger completes the pass to Jesse James, but now let me tell you why we're not going to rule it as a complete pass. That's just chaos. How can you possibly have a situation where we all know it's a catch, but we can't rule it that way because the NFL has crazy rules?
Yeah, look, when this is all we're talking about, it certainly takes away from the game. And I think that's the biggest issue. I don't want to spend all day on it. I thought we talked in the office this morning. You had a pretty simple solution for this, Sam. Maybe if you just implement this, it doesn't become a debate point anymore.
I don't understand why you need to complicate it. Get possession, 2 feet down, catch. Why do you need the football move thing or the did he become a runner, blah, blah. The only downside, as far as I can tell, of making that the rule is that you increase the number of fumbles that are currently ruled as incomplete passes where the guy catches the ball, gets hit, and the ball pops out. In my proposed catch definition, those would become fumbles. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. That becomes a live ball. That's more interesting plays. Turnovers wildly influence games and create some dramatic swings of momentum. So I'm all for that. I don't think you need to complicate this. Let's just make it 2 feet down with possession equals catch. Job done.
Yeah, I don't mind that. It would create some craziness. I think my bigger issue is there are so many plays like this one where the receiver has control of the football and does something with it with his hands. He extends it, he reaches, he does something. If you're doing that, that tells me you have control of the ball. You don't need to complete it to the ground. That was the Dez Bryant catch a couple of years ago in the playoffs. Dez caught it, and that was this catch. You know, he went untouched. He's going to the ground. He reaches it over the goal line, and after he reaches over the goal line, it hits the ground. You shouldn't need to complete the catch all the way through if you're reaching and doing something with it.
Once he breaks the plane, it should be a touchdown.
It should be done. Either whether you're breaking a plane or not, you're just down, right? Because you're doing something with the ball. You have control of it and you're reaching. So that seems simple to me.
Yeah, I mean, I just find it hilarious that in their own video to justify why it wasn't a completion, they called it a completion in the first line. I mean, that's when you know your rules are broken.
All right, before we move on, Sam, anything else in that New England-Pittsburgh game that stood out? Essentially, right now, what it means is New England currently is the number 1 seed. They control their own destiny. Certainly not over because they need to win out to secure, or they're tied with Pittsburgh and they have the tiebreaker now because of the win, which means they would be the number 1 and 2 seed if the season ended today, and the AFC Championship would go through New England. And that's why that whole call and this whole game was just incredible. I just love the fact that this was the game of the year, all season. This is what everybody was looking forward to, and it did live up to the hype. It was a great back and forth battle.
Yeah, I think it was from a playoff and seeding standpoint, it was a big blow to the Steelers. But I think big picture, everything else to come out of that game is good news for them in terms of their prospects of being able to beat New England in the playoffs, which is ultimately what this was billed as, a playoff preview game. And I think that's still what it was. And from that standpoint, I think it was all good news for the Steelers.
And I think you could look at it the other way, too, and say New England handled an excellent game plan by Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh executed everything they wanted to do, I think, offensively, despite not having Antonio Brown, and New England still found a way to win. So I think you could see it both ways, and I would not be surprised if we see an AFC Championship rematch between these two teams. I want to move on to probably one of the most surprising outcomes of the weekend. The Rams absolutely destroy the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. And I think that's the big thing. We always put Seattle on a pedestal when they play at home, and I think rightfully so. They have a track record of success there. Before we get into the game, all I know, Sam, is I'm seeing Seattle eulogies written all across the league right now. People are saying the Seahawks are done. The Rams have overtaken them as the future of the NFC West. I mean, I'm fully ready to give the Rams all the credit they deserve for 2017, but I'm also not ready to declare the NFC West the Rams going forward just because of what's happened here recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand that the Seahawks still have Russell Wilson, and as long as that's the case, they're always going to be there or thereabouts. He is one of those quarterbacks that is good enough to drag almost any roster to a postseason berth, in the same way Andrew Luck made the Indianapolis Colts playoff contenders pretty much every season. Aaron Rodgers makes the Green Bay Packers playoff contenders every single season. Russell Wilson is in that caliber of quarterback that as long as they have him, they're not out of this division race ever. They're going to be there every single year. I think they do need to come up with a way of blocking Aaron Donald, as in actually specifically game plan to take him away from games, because
find good guards.
Well, that would be one way of doing it, and that would be the way that I think most people would choose. But for whatever reason, the Seahawks decide that that's not the way they need to approach their offensive line, and they're going a different route. And I think you can still do it by going a different route, but you actually need to work a bit harder at it. The Rams, or Russell Wilson has his worst record in the NFL against the Rams. Jeff Fisher's Rams would consistently beat the Seahawks, and we used to think it was just this jinx of Jeff Fisher somehow being able to beat all the teams in his division and consequently keep himself in a job. But the big thing that was always true at those games is that Aaron Donald would just tear through the Seahawks offensive line. Now, the Seahawks have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, so anytime you go up against one of the best interior defenders in the NFL, it's going to create a bloodbath. But, I mean, he was basically good enough to be the difference between a bad team and the Seahawks. Now that team isn't bad anymore, so he's the difference between a good team winning and a good team stomping the living life out of them. So, I mean, they're going to need a plan to beat Aaron, or to keep Aaron Donald quiet, because that Rams team is now, I mean, let's say it's the equal, if not better, of the Seahawks. So they're going to need to do something about that.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. I mean, look, Seattle, they do need to do a better job of drafting. I think in recent years they have not had the same influx of talents that they had, say, 5 or 6 years ago. When you see guys like Richard Sherman and Bobby Wagner and, of course, Russell Wilson and all the guys that created this core for the team. So I think those are just the cycles that teams go through. The cycle's not bad enough, though, that it's like, all right, the Rams are just the better team. I mean, even on paper, the Rams aren't the better team, I don't think, right now.
No, I mean, I think, look at the injuries they've got. That's a huge thing. You can't look at this Seahawks team that turned out yesterday and think, well, that's what they are in 2018, because it won't be. Right.
Now, as much as you want to say, well, Richard Sherman gets hurt and Cam Chancellor gets hurt, and those guys it's not that they're old, but that's what happens with veteran players. But that's my whole point, right? You don't write the eulogy. You don't say these guys are done in a year where Sherman is hurt and Chancellor's hurt, and you still have Russell Wilson. So that's my take on the Seahawks. If anything, all it sets up is a great battle. I would say, hey, look, the Rams are here to stay. They're here to battle the Seahawks. It might be a great back and forth over the next couple of years, and then you throw Jimmy G into the mix, Sam, the undefeated Jimmy G, and it's going to be an awesome NFC West going forward. But let's give the Rams proper credit here. Todd Gurley I mean, just continues to be one of the best all-around players in the league this year. Offensive line, we've talked about quite a bit, and the variety of playmakers, and of course Aaron Donald on defense, but other guys playing well all year too. LaMarcus Joyner on the back end, Michael Brockers, who we mentioned last week. So it has been fun to watch this Rams team really come together the last couple seasons.
The defense, I think, is the real X factor in this balance of power thing within this division, because this is the first year under Wade Phillips, and it's essentially being cobbled together with whatever was already on the roster. There isn't that much talent within this defense. Obviously, in Aaron Donald, you've got maybe the best defensive player in the league on this defense, but outside of him, there isn't that much, and yet they're really overachieving and looking like a very strong defense. Suddenly think what happens if you actually add some legitimate talent to that defense. Like if they have a fantastic defensive draft this year, and suddenly you have that Wade Phillips defensive scheme, and now you've got a wealth of talent to add to it as well. I mean, that's when you start talking about a shift in the balance of power within the division.
Yeah, we know how good Phillips was in Denver when he had Aqib Talib on the outside and Chris Harris and Bradley Roby. And you're right, cobbled together is a good way of putting it. Tremaine Johnson's a solid player on the outside. They've got solid cornerbacks right now. Nickel Roby-Coleman playing pretty well. Your boy Troy Hill had a big game yesterday.
Just a matter of time.
Just a matter of time. He finally started to put it together here in year 3. But it's not like they've got talent, the same type of talent that Wade was used to having in Denver. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of upside for that defense. And despite all this stuff, we've talked about Jared Goff a little bit before. I like Jared Goff. I think he's on the right path, but he's taken a big step forward. But it's not like he is dominant at this point in his career either. He's good, and there's still plenty of room to grow. So, look, I like the upside for the Rams. I like where they're headed. I'm also not ready to declare them the heavyweights of the NFC West. That's a little overreaction here today.
Yeah, I think that goes too far right now. Certainly for this season, it was a huge game for them, statement game. They took the division away from Seattle this year, which I think is huge. But I don't know if that's going to be the same thing in 2018 and beyond.
All right, Sam, I want to discuss was this your favorite part of yesterday?
Yes.
Not
just yesterday.
Video.
This may be my favorite thing in the entire season.
I thought this was a meme at first, the Cam Newton thing. Can you explain the whole Cam Newton thing? I really thought it was a meme, and I'm like, oh, funny meme. Somebody put words to this play, and then it was actually reality.
Yeah, no, Cam Newton basically had himself a little chat during lining up. Everyone lined up on offense and defense, and Cam Newton and Clay Matthews had a little back and forth, which was basically like a movie. I think we've got audio clip of exactly what took place. So let's listen to that now.
It's that wheel route. It's that wheel route.
So yeah, Cam Newton gets to the line. Clay Matthews starts calling out what he thinks he knows they're going to run. He's looking for a wheel route. Cam Newton says to him, "Oh, you've been watching film. That's good. Watch this," and throws a touchdown to Christian McCaffrey. That is that's straight out of a movie. That doesn't happen in real life.
That's like Michael Jordan, shooting free throws with his eyes closed. Welcome to the NBA, Rook. I mean, that stuff really doesn't happen. You're right. That's unbelievable. Who calls plays out like that?
That is absolutely amazing. Between that and the index card gate, those are the two funniest moments, I think, of this weekend for entirely different reasons. I just love...
Week 15 had it all. This was one of the craziest weeks of NFL action. Good and bad, good, bad, indifferent. I mean, it was just a crazy week overall.
I just love that this game of precision and inches and exacting, split frame instant replays is still organized by two guys with a set of chains that come on from the sideline. And then if you really can't tell whether the football made the first down marker with the chains, you break out a folded index card because that'll give you the answer.
Gene Steratore. My favorite part about that is how confidently he went to the index card. It's not even like part of protocol for the refs. It's not even a thing. I feel like he's been waiting for this moment. I've never seen a play or a measurement that close.
No,
because all the refs
impressive.
just looked at each other like we don't know if it's a first down or not.
But just there's so much wrong with the idea of, well, that index card proved it.
Everybody's asking about technology doing it, but I think other people have mentioned there are limitations to technology as well as far as orientation of the ball, and we've seen even some of the chip data that the NFL uses is off by a significant enough margin. It's off by more than an index card. Okay, I'll say that. So
that's what Hawkeye's for, isn't it? Hawkeye does it with the tennis and cricket and all this kind of stuff. That's supposed to be exacting measurements of the ball. Let's break out some Hawkeye equipment here.
I don't know. I trust the index card. My only issue is the fact that I think it was folded twice, and I think a once folded index card might have been a different result for the Raiders. Quick break to tell you that this episode is brought to you by PredictionMachine.com. Prediction Machine, a new generation in sports analytics where they play the game 50,000 times before they're actually played. Make better picks with proven data-driven analysis. Subscribe at PredictionMachine.com today and earn a $5 credit that can be used towards the purchase of any package. All right, Sam, let's try to fly through the rest of the stories from Week 15. Let's start with Nick Foles and the Eagles. You wrote about them last week. You said, Eagles fans, don't worry, you're going to be okay with Nick Foles at the helm for various reasons. I think some of that was true. Some of that wasn't true. What'd you think of that whole game as far as Foles' performance, but also the Eagles' defense giving up a ton?
Yeah, the defense was a little bit concerning. I mean, the big names, I think, still played pretty well. At least Fletcher Cox was pretty dominant. Vinny Curry had a nice game. Brandon Graham was okay. But they gave up a lot to the Giants' offense, which hasn't exactly been on fire over the course of the season. I think that's a bit concerning. But I think the general theme that we pulled out with the Nick Foles thing was really dead on in that just look at his numbers. 24 of 38 for 237 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, a passer rating of 116 essentially. But his grade wasn't great. He didn't grade phenomenally well at all. And it's exactly what we were saying. That scheme is really good at manufacturing plays for the quarterback, allowing them to make some relatively easy reads and simple throws and gain significant yardage. Now, he also got a big boy catch out of Nelson Aguilar and a contested catch in the end zone that I didn't think was necessarily in him in terms of Aguilar.
Big boy catch. You were so excited. You and I, we have an ongoing Skype conversation throughout the day on Sunday, and you were just, exclamation points left and right. Big boy catch for my boy Aguilar.
I just didn't think, we've talked before about that's the limitation of his game. I didn't know that he had that catch in him. So, Foles is helped out by a couple of plays like that, but broadly speaking, this was what we said would happen, that offense is good enough schematically to make Nick Foles look better than he actually is, or to put another way, to basically boost the production that they would get out of him if they were trying to run, any other scheme, a conventional NFL scheme. So I think they are okay with Nick Foles, a quarterback, as long as those other things, like the defense, pick it up and play to the standard we expected of them all the way through the year.
Yeah, I'm not terribly concerned about the defense. There have been some signs, though, of their ability to give up some big plays. But, going into a playoff scenario with that defensive line and, the way they're playing in coverage on the back end, I think that's the most important thing. They will be okay long term. And, look, 1-0 now with Foles under center. He's still not Carson Wentz, but he's a guy that he can win with. That's all you said last week.
The important thing is
the Chiefs.
It made me look smart. It
made you look smart for 1 week, Sam. At least for 1 week.
Yeah.
In the short term.
That's all I'm looking for. 1 week at a time.
The Los Angeles Chargers lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. We had all jumped back on the Los Angeles Chargers bandwagon. Much like the Eagles, you just look at this roster and you say pass rushers, coverage guys, hot quarterback, top 5 wide receiver, had everything that you need formula-wise, except Phillip Rivers did not play like he had played the previous 4 weeks. He went back to YOLO Phillip Rivers, and the Chiefs, I think, rounded back into form. I think when you start to look at the Chiefs season, it was, this hot start, midseason lull. Are they back to what we thought they were going to be earlier in the year, which is an AFC contender?
Well, first off, let's cool the jets with we had all jumped back on this Chargers bandwagon.
Oh, wait, did you take the Chiefs?
One of us here picked the Kansas City Chiefs last week.
Oh, wow. Good insight, Sam.
So this segment is the Sam Look Smart segment.
Where else do you look smart? What else do we need to? Didn't you? Oh, wait, you said Keenum wasn't going to be good. We're going to talk about him.
Nailed the Nick Foles thing. Nailed the Chiefs beating the Chargers for no particular
once we get
reason.
to Aaron Rodgers. Once we
There
get to
you
Aaron
go.
Rodgers, that'll tear you
The
down.
Aaron Rodgers. No, we nailed the Aaron Rodgers thing.
No, you thought he was going to the playoffs.
I picked Carolina to beat Green Bay last week, as did you. We both said that they were going to stay alive long enough for him to get back, and then it wouldn't make a difference because the Panthers would win.
Oh, we did say that.
So
sometimes I don't remember what we
you
said.
look smart in that bit. I look smart on lots of different things.
All right, let's continue making you look good.
Yeah. So the Kansas City Chiefs appear to be the only team in the NFL that have worked out that like 65% of the Chargers' offense is just shallow crossing routes. And if you take those away, they suck. Phillip Rivers had 2 of his worst games of the season against the Kansas City Chiefs this year. And it's not a coincidence. Like, they know how to stop that offense. That's exactly what they did this week. They really limited the offense. Their offense got going again. We got to see Kareem Hunt play pretty well. The offensive line was playing well. Alex Smith, again, had another pretty good game. Tyreek Hill, we jinxed Casey Hayward. That didn't make us look good at all.
He played hurt, and he did. No, look, Tyreek Hill is in a just different world of speed.
Yes.
Hayward did look a step slow on that. I don't know if that's just Tyreek Hill being Hill, though.
Could be. Either way, we kind of jinxed Casey Hayward. That didn't work out too well. But basically, the Chiefs got back on track. They do know how to beat the Chargers, which helps. I think generally they're right back in it in terms of, well, they're the favorites for that division now because they won that game.
I'll say this about the Chiefs. You know, the teams that you can just tell from a game planning standpoint, when they see something, they just take advantage of it. We talked about this with Antonio Brown the last few weeks. Why have teams been singling him late in the game? Like in prevent situations, it's like, yeah, we'll just play man coverage on Antonio Brown. And it seems like every time that happened, Ben Roethlisberger would take a deep shot with him or to him. I feel like Alex Smith has that with Tyreek Hill now, which again goes against his pathologically conservative nature that you always talked about, that they do have this trump card going into the playoffs that you just, if you just out of 65 or 70 snaps, if you just forget that Tyreek Hill's out there for one play and leave him singled up and just leave this one-on-one opportunity, it's a legitimate touchdown opportunity no matter where they are in the field. And I think that is a big factor for the Chiefs, and I do feel like they are taking advantage of it in recent weeks. They did it against the Jets a few weeks ago, did it against the Chargers, and it ended up being a huge play again in this division battle.
And this is the point that we made earlier in the season about a different Alex Smith, in that as long as he is still prepared to take that shot when he sees one-on-one with Tyreek Hill, they're in business this year in a way they wouldn't have been in seasons past, where he was just too conservative, and until he saw him wide open, he wouldn't put the ball in the air. Now he's at least always willing to take that shot, and whether it's successful or not, in the bigger picture, that is a huge thing for Alex Smith and this offense.
We just did a quick video on the Twitter machine discussing Case Keenum. We expected the wheels to fall off of Keenum. He's actually getting better, though, as the season progresses.
Yeah, this is a huge game for the Vikings because there was a few blowouts this week. We talked before about the Rams stomping the Seahawks, the Jaguars beat the Texans, they beat the brakes off them, and the Vikings had this game against Cincinnati wrapped up in the third quarter sometime, which was huge for them. One, because again, Case Keenum looked good. Two, because they played well enough that they got some game time out of Teddy Bridgewater, which, I mean, one, it's just a fantastic story. He got such a loud ovation coming onto the field that he couldn't actually hear the call coming in from the sideline when his own side is on offense. Usually not the way it works, but I think he'd live with it this time. It didn't exactly go particularly well, and then I think his first pass was intercepted, and he basically handed the ball off most of the time. But I think it was an important thing for him to get out there, for the Vikings to get him out there, and at least get the process started in terms of getting him on the field. But Case Keenum continues to look good. I, perhaps more than anybody, have been waiting for the moment the wheels do fall off this Case Keenum thing. But, I mean, maybe it isn't going to happen. Maybe we're going to get an improved Case Keenum like in perpetuity now that the situation around him is better.
He's just reeling you further and further in. It's going to be the divisional round. it's in a major upset. It's going to be the conference championship in crunch time. Now, look, credit when credit is due. Forget the history of the Minnesota Vikings. I love the fact. Look, I thought last week against the Panthers, we talked about it. As far as throwing the football, one of his best games. He took 6 sacks and maybe could have felt that a little bit better, like he had previously in the for much of the year. But man, he was making tight window throws to Adam Thielen, up the seam everywhere. And in this game, the Bengals defense has been a disaster the last couple weeks. Mitch Trubisky tore them apart, and then Keenum did this past week. But still, he's from a grading standpoint, statistical standpoint, everything's actually getting better. And when you have Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs and Kyle Rudolph and all these different weapons and ways of using them, and a guy that's making good decisions and keeping the offense on schedule, that's something you can win with, especially when you have that good defense on the other side. So, finally, I'm finally around on the Vikings here as a team that can do it. I just think the NFC, though, it's so wide open. We don't know what the heck's going to happen week to week. There's no sense in making definitive statements, but I think the Vikings can win with Keenum, especially if he keeps playing like this.
Yeah, I mean, we said last week the big thing for them was that offensive line being healthy. I think that still remains the case. They had Rashad Hill at left tackle in this game, which wasn't ideal. I do think they need their starting 5 offensive linemen to be all the way through the postseason if they're going to make it that far, because it does make a huge difference having that group, which isn't exactly amazing, but is good enough for them to play well with. When they lose one of those guys and they have to go into the bench, they have the potential to really have an issue on the offensive line.
Yeah, I will say that when it comes to playoff time, it does seem like teams get exploited. Their weaknesses get exploited, right? So we'll have all of our playoff preseason or previews and all of our coverage and all that stuff. It's going to be important for us to go through each team's weakness, because I do think those are the things that show up. And for Minnesota, despite the low sack rate for Keenum, definitely the offensive line, especially without health. All right, Sam, are the Browns going to win a game? They've got 2 games left on the road for 2 games. Are the Browns going to win?
So their 2 games are on the road to Chicago and then on the road to Pittsburgh in Week 17. And, I mean, on paper, the Chicago one would look like their best chance to get a win. But the X factor with the Pittsburgh game is that we don't know where their playoff situation will be at that point. They may well be in a situation where there's nothing to play for, and they walk out Landry Jones for that game. And if that happens, that's their best chance of winning a game.
And rest Antonio Brown, who's banged up now. Yeah.
Now, that's happened before, and the Browns still managed to lose to Landry Jones. So it's not exactly a gimme, but I still think that's their best chance of winning a game, is if the Steelers are playing backups and Landry Jones is out there at quarterback. If the Steelers actually care about that game, then obviously the Chicago Bears is the easier opponent. And it's certainly possible. I mean, the Bears aren't great. They were handled relatively easy by the Lions this past week. I think the defense has fallen off a little bit over the season. We haven't seen them take the training wheels off Mitch Trubisky much this year, and when they did this past week, it resulted in some pretty horrendous interceptions, which would be a big thing for the Browns in that game. I think they might be able to sneak past the Bears. Yeah,
look, I look at a team that goes 0-16, your 2008 Detroit Lions. I just don't think the Browns are that bad. They should not be an 0-16 team.
It's very hard to go 0-16. There is a reason it's only happened once.
I'm running out of weeks here, though, Sam.
Yeah.
My whole thing is you stumble into a win, right? The same thing. If you get enough pressures, you'll stumble into sacks. If you have 16 games, you'll stumble into a win one time. They haven't yet.
No,
I still think they will, though.
And the problem is now it's a case of twice. You know, they're 0-14, so now you're a case of, well, if they've got 2 games, can they get a win somewhere? And that becomes less of a sure thing.
Yeah, the odds are working against me here. One of the stories of the season, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they clinch a playoff spot, absolutely dominate the Houston Texans. And I don't want to get too far into Blake Bortles because I already talked to Zach Robinson. We want to break him down in depth on the QB pod. But what are your thoughts on the Jags? Bortles playing as well as any quarterback these last 3 or 4 weeks. And I guess their prospects in the playoffs, we keep saying they're the team you probably don't want to face.
I think there's a lot of teams like that. I mean, yeah, the Jags look pretty terrifying. More so if Bortles is for real and is able to actually play well for an extended period of time. I mean, this was a dangerous team when they were an elite defense that could run the ball and were basically going to do anything in their power to stop Blake Bortles having to attempt to pass ever. I mean, they were pretty formidable then. If you then add in the fact that Blake Bortles is no longer a liability, suddenly you're looking at legitimately one of the best teams in the league. I mean, they've still got a chance of a first round bye. That isn't out of the question. They could still, I think, get the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. Is that right?
Technically, they can, yeah, because New England and Pittsburgh are both sitting there with 3 losses apiece, and the Jags have 4 losses. So, yeah, they would need essentially, I don't know what the tiebreaker situation is, but New England would have to lose 1 or 2.
Sure. So, all right, the number 1 overall seed thing isn't going to happen, but they're still chasing a bye, and that's significant. This is a very good team that is firing on all cylinders.
They are, yes. They have the tiebreaker over Pittsburgh because they did beat them. And don't forget, they picked off Roethlisberger 5 times when they played in that game. So that's what I'm saying is, historically the teams that have slowed down New England, that have slowed down Pittsburgh, have slowed down Peyton Manning and the good quarterbacks through the years. It's a good defensive team. And they do very much remind me of, mentioned last week, that the early Rex Ryan Jets, 2009, 2010, where Mark Sanchez in any given week was capable of playing decent football. The difference here is Bortles he's strung a few weeks together. They're scheming pretty well. He's throwing, downfield touch passes looking really good. So things are coming together there.
There may not be a hotter pass rusher in the entire NFL than Yannick Ngakoue, who has 31 total pressures in his last 7 games.
Yeah, and there's just names everywhere, though, because there's Calais Campbell and there's Malik Jackson. I mean, there's all these different players on the Jags that can get pressure at any given time. As I was watching their game yesterday, too, you just reminded that, oh, yeah, they traded for Marcel Darius in the middle as well.
Yeah.
They just have, just a deep defensive line that can come at you from all angles. All right, let's discuss Jimmy G, the legend of Jimmy G. Still sitting on 2 Super Bowl rings. He has not added to that yet, but he remains undefeated at 3-0, makes a fourth quarter comeback, and just continuing to run that offense at a high level, 3-0 since joining the 1-win 49ers.
Yeah, the unbeatable Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, that's
5-0 for his career, if you break it down.
He is essentially an unbeatable perfect quarterback right now. Possibly not true, but at least, in terms of wins, QB wins, 5-0. He looks good. I mean, I think
that's the bigger thing. He looks comfortable. Yeah. He's making plays under pressure and got away with a couple as far as interceptions go against Tennessee, but overall looking really good.
Yeah, I think so. And, that was a game where he had some problems with his offensive line. The right side, Brandon Fusco and Zane Beatles were getting beat pretty consistently. So it's not like he had the perfect platform to work from. But, yeah, I think the 49ers look to have found their quarterback of the future.
I'm more fascinated by the football community. A lot of people are really on the Jimmy G bandwagon. I think he's good. Again, I've always compared him to Matt Hasselbeck, high-end Matt Hasselbeck. That's, a guy that's capable of putting together some really good years and winning games for you. There's some people that are really, really believe in Garoppolo. But look, no matter what he ends up being, the Niners seem like they're on the way up as far as talent goes. Love some of the defensive pieces. Reuben Foster still playing at an extremely high level. The rookie linebacker. Love some of the other pieces that they drafted. If Garoppolo continues to play well, we already talked earlier about the Rams, and we talked about the eulogy for the Seahawks. The NFC West getting really interesting in future years, especially if Garoppolo is this legit. So he's I don't change the channel every time the 49ers are on. How's that for a compliment?
Yeah, they've progressed to the point where you no longer immediately turn to some other team.
A lot more exciting in San Francisco now. And shout out to our boy Bobby Slowick, of course, his 4th win as defensive quality control coach there. And let's discuss Aaron Rodgers, his return. Green Bay Packers end up losing to the Carolina Panthers. You mentioned it earlier. This is as predicted, right? They stayed alive long enough for Rodgers to come back. And even though he came back, something was off, Sam. He had 3 interceptions, which I chalked up to almost all being the same thing. He had 3 tight window throws that he just left a little bit short. I wouldn't even say that they were bad decisions because they were tight window throws. that he often makes. He just left them short. Like something was off. He missed what also should have been probably an easy touchdown in the flat that he just straight bounced. I don't know if you could blame him after he missed, 10 weeks of action. He just looked a little rusty and something was off.
Yeah, I mean, what was the statistic that I gave you? It was the first 3-interception game of his since 2009, something like that?
2009, yeah. To me, it was reminiscent of that Peyton 2012 game when he was coming off the neck surgery. You always reference it. He threw 3 picks against the Falcons, and it was just like, hey, I just can't make those throws anymore. Yeah. And it's not that this is like a debilitating injury for Rodgers. He probably just isn't 100% and thought he had 100%, and he only had 90, and he left a couple passes short. That's just what it looked like.
I think that was just it was just a case study in essentially whatever the football equivalent of ring rust is. He hadn't played for a while. It was pretty crazy to expect him to be able to walk right on the field and be the MVP that he would need to be in order to start dragging this team back to the playoffs against a pretty good Panthers team. So it just made too much sense for them, for this team to come back. They stayed alive just long enough for Rodgers to give them a shot, but realistically, that was always going to be a really big ask.
Yeah, and Carolina just keeps rolling, and Cam Newton's calling his shot, and look, they're right in the mix too. Sam, we could spend hours breaking down this NFC and what's going to happen and all this stuff. I don't think I can't figure it out. I just think there's just all these good teams that they seem to be beating each other up every single week too. They're all playing each other, whether it's an actual playoff team or a potential playoff game like this matchup with Green Bay. I cannot wait to watch the NFC playoffs because I think any of the 6 teams that get in legitimately could be in the Super Bowl.
I honestly think both sides are starting to shape up pretty nicely. I think the AFC, there's a couple more teams in there that you think just have no shot at doing anything, even if the stars align. But there are a lot of teams. I mean, this really is a wide open season in terms of who could be representing their conference in the Super Bowl and even who could take it.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. Anything else this weekend that stood out, or we ready to wrap it up and get right into QB Pod is the next one, Sam?
I think we're ready to wrap. I'm going to go and learn the intricacies of index cards and exactly how they should be used to measure things.
Yeah, look, I just think the folded one is just unacceptable because that's pretty arbitrary. The unfolded index card is the only one I think acceptable next time around. So I think the NFL needs to get the rules committee on that. What the thickness of the index card allowed when figuring out if a play is a first down.
And also if they have a moment, fix the catch rule so that at least we have some vague idea of what is a catch.
We need something to discuss all offseason. We'll have a whole catch rule podcast this offseason. We'll discuss it in depth. I like it. Just 2 feet down and it's over. All right, guys, that'll do it for us today. We'll be back again later in the week. We've got the QB podcast, as I mentioned, with Zach and I. We've got the mailbag, which, of course, you guys can contribute to, podcasts at profootballfocus.com. And then we'll have the Week 16 review later in the week. Please give us your feedback. Hit us up on Twitter. I'm at PFF_Steve. He's at PFF_Sam. And don't forget to get to profootballfocus.com. Check out Edge, check out Elite, and you guys can all get $10 off when you use the promo code PFF10 on any of the PFF products. Thanks, guys. We will talk to you next time.